August the 29th, 2016, 40-year-old Alan Haw murdered his wife, Clodagh, and their three sons, 13-year-old Liam, 11-year-old Niall and 6-year-old Ryan in their home in County Cavan. Using a hatchet and knives, he first brutally killed Clodagh in the sitting room before heading upstairs to murder the three boys who were asleep in their beds. Hall was vice principal in a local national school, and he was also involved in the GAA and the church. It transpired later he had an obsession with pornography and was worried that this would become publicly known. It remains Ireland's biggest ever murder-suicide. Well, Clodagh's sister Jacqueline has just written a memoir, Deadly Silence, much of which focuses on this most evil of crimes. And shortly before we came on air, she joined me in studio, and I began by asking her, what was Clodagh like?
Growing up, Clodagh was very much a motherly figure, growing up to myself and my younger brother Tig, and she never changed in that way. She was always very caring and warm and happy, and she was a fantastic mother herself then to her own children. And she grew into being just so mature, and so at a very young age she was very mature, and then she just was that motherly figure all the time.
It's hard to know what goes on in other people's relationships, but when did you first notice that he was a bit controlling?
I can't say that I did notice that he was controlling, in that we didn't know what coercive control was at the time and what a controlling relationship looked like. Control was very much masked as love. When you saw Alan with Clodagh and the boys, they were one. They were seen as a family unit. They seemed from the outside happy, nothing wrong, and I think that's the very scary part about all of this, and the fact that it was so hidden and so silent. There was no way of knowing that he was controlling.
Do you mind going back to the day when the murders took place? How did you first hear?
I was in work in Clontarf. I was a long distance from home. A colleague came to ask me to come with her to another office, and I was met with the CEO, and Edie was Clodagh's neighbour, and her son was sent to give me the news, so that's how I found out.
And then your poor mum, she went to the house, didn't she?
She did, because Clodagh was dropping Niall and Ryan to her house that day. Liam was going to school in Virginia College, so when they didn't arrive, she started to worry, because Clodagh would always have told Mam, you know, I'm on the way, or I'm running late, and when that didn't happen, Mam got a bad feeling and she went towards the house, and when she arrived then the curtains were drawn, and she thought maybe it was carbon monoxide poisoning. You know, what else would you think? And when she went around to the back door, there was a note pinned or taped to the back door saying, "Don't come in, call the gardaí." So that's how she knew there was something very wrong. And her words were, "I think Alan's done something terrible." And that's all that she knew at that time. We knew no other information for the rest of that day.
When did you find out as a family what he actually did to your sister and your three nephews? When did you find out that information?
Well, really, our first formal visit from the first investigation team was on the Wednesday. They were murdered on the Monday. And that was the first time we were formally told there was a murder letter. And a large amount of documents left on the kitchen table that were meticulously organised, given instructions, really, on what needed to be done.
Because he had left 2 notes, is that right?
He had left the note on the back door, and then he had written a murder letter, and he wrote that letter following, he had killed Clodagh, and then he sat down and wrote that letter before he murdered the boys.
You blame yourself wrongly, don't you, that he was buried initially alongside Clodagh and your 3 nephews and her 3 boys. Why do you blame yourself?
Because I saw them in the private viewing room in the funeral home, and you say wrongly, I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for that, in that I saw them laid out beside their murderer, and I couldn't reconcile that he had done what he did and that they were all in front of me, dead. And I was closest in that room to make that decision, and I didn't. And I will never not regret that decision.
In the end, though, you did change that, didn't you?
We changed that by application of an exhumation, but the exhumation law is very much on the next of kin side. So in order for Alan Hall to be exhumed, that was not within our gift. The decision was with his family. And that took some time to get done. It was the following May before he was exhumed.
Around the time, a lot of people were talking about Hall as, you know, a pillar of the community. That's why that campaign, Her Name is Clodagh, began. How did you, as a family, feel when there were people talking about him as a pillar of the community?
In hindsight, those people were fooled as much as we were, and they were misinformed as much as we were. Alan Hall spent a lot of time with the community at school, in the church, GAA. He was very hidden, very silent, and so nobody could be blamed for thinking that he was this good man, a caring man, a trusted man that anybody who wanted anything done to go to.
Now, it wasn't, I think, until 2019 when you did an interview with Claire Byrne, with your mom, that after that a serious crime review was set up, and that changed everything for you, didn't it?
It did. Regrettably, we had to go public on Claire Byrne Live in 2019 due to the fact that there were answers that we weren't getting to our questions. And really, the onus was put on us as the family of the victims, which should never have happened, to seek answers in what was a coroner's investigation, where it should have been deemed a criminal investigation, although the perpetrator wasn't alive. And so, following the interview, a serious crime review was sanctioned by Garda Commissioner Drew Harris.
And it's extensive, I gather, like 800 plus pages.
Yeah.
Not published, though.
No, it's not published, and I appeal to the Garda Commissioner to please release those findings so that the timelines, patterns and behaviours of family annihilators are out there for the public, the general public, for people who are being abused or in controlling relationships, and for domestic violence services to advance their policies and procedures.
Because I know it's not easy for you, and part of the reason you've written this book is you don't want Clodagh and your three beautiful nephews to have died in vain. You never want this to happen again. So you want the laws changed around murder-suicide.
Yeah. So the investigation around murder-suicide, and although we've been advised that any file in the future, you know, that gardaí are trained in Templemore to treat a file for murder-suicide as though it's going to the DPP, really, that needs to start from the very beginning of the investigation. This needs to be rolled out in local Garda stations where gardaí in rural areas like Castleratton in County Cavan, where Clodagh and the boys were murdered, they need to be trained. Those two gardaí were not trained to have to face such a horrific scene that day and the trauma that they must have faced. So it's important to protect those who have to deal with murder-suicides as well as advancing the policies.
Finally, Jacqueline, I know none of this is easy for you, and part of the reason you wrote the book is you want to say to people, men and people like Alan Hall, they're out there, they're amongst us. What would you say to anyone tonight who feels that they are in a controlled relationship?
I have to be very careful. I am not an expert in giving advice on a controlling relationship or what that looks like in totality. But there are services out there for anyone who's in a controlling relationship. Please use them. And when you're deciding to leave a relationship, that is the most dangerous time. And just to be safe and to be very, I suppose, be very careful about when you're leaving. I mean, we can see from the serious crime review, Alan Hall was probably able to see Clodagh's Google searches about leaving. So.
Well, look, Jacqueline, thank you very much, because I know it's not easy. Thank you for coming in tonight in Deadly Silence. It's a very powerful book. I know you wrote it with Catherine Rogers.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming in tonight. I'm so sorry for what happened to your sister and your nephews.
Thank you.